Imagine stepping down from a leadership role because the very people you've protected your entire life decided you just weren't, flashy enough.
Right, like you just didn't fit the specific mold they were looking for.
Exactly. They want someone taller, someone who looks the part of a traditional ruler, just to fit in with the competition. I mean, you'd probably walk away pretty bitter.
Oh, absolutely. Most people would just hope they fail so they could feel vindicated.
Yeah, but in ancient Israel, one leader responded to this like ultimate betrayal with a terrifying thunderstorm and just a breathtaking promise. So, welcome to the deep dive.
It's going to be a fascinating one today.
It really is. But before we unpack how all of this unfolds, I just want to take a moment to warmly welcome you, the listener, and offer a heartfelt divine blessing for your day and the week ahead. May you find clarity, peace, and purpose in whatever you're facing right now.
Yes, we are so glad you're digging into this with us today.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore 1 Samuel chapter 12, and we're going to be drawing on the historical context and the theological insights from the Holman and NWA study Bibles.
Which are just fantastic resources for this because this is a massive pivot point in history.
It really is. I mean, we are watching the end of the era of the judges, these regional kind of temporary leaders raised up for specific crises, and we're seeing the dawn of the monarchy.
Right, Israel is getting its very first human king, Saul.
Yeah, and they're all gathered at a place called Gilgal, which historically is a site of national renewal. And Samuel, who has led these people for decades, is officially handing over the reign.
But he doesn't do it with, a carefully choreographed PR spin.
No, not at all. Which is so different from today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
modern leadership transitions are so highly sanitized.
Oh, yeah. A CEO steps down or a political administration changes hands, and the entire focus is on preserving legacy. Vulnerability is it's treated as an absolute liability.
Right. The outgoing leaders team sweeps all the controversies under the rug and highlights only the undeniable victories. But Samuel takes the exact opposite approach.
He really does. He insists on starting this transition with what is basically an ultimate public audit.
Yeah. He stands in front of the entire nation with the newly minted King Saul right there watching and essentially says, testify against me before God.
He asks them to answer for his entire career.
Exactly. He's like, has he ever stolen an ox or a donkey? Has he defrauded or oppressed a single person?
Has he ever taken a bribe to just, look the other way?
And to really understand this, we have to view it through the lens of the ancient Near East. Because in that era, power was entirely synonymous with self-enrichment.
Right. A leader taking a citizen's ox wasn't considered corruption. It was literally just the cost of doing business.
It was taxation. Rulers operating with a sense of entitlement was just the baseline expectation.
So for Samuel to stand up and demand that the public scrutinize his ledger, it's a radical subversion of how authority even functioned back then.
It's the equivalent of a modern politician, or like a Wall Street CEO standing in the middle of a packed stadium with a live microphone.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And just inviting any citizen, employee, or contractor they've ever interacted with to publicly audit their personal bank accounts and closed-door decisions.
We would think that person was completely out of their mind. The risk is astronomical.
But the crowd at Gilgal responds unanimously. They confirm his hands are completely clean. He hasn't defrauded or oppressed anyone.
And the Holman study notes point out a really interesting underlying strategy here. This public accounting isn't a retirement party, and Samuel isn't just fishing for compliments.
Right.
By proving his own servant leadership and documenting his lack of personal enrichment, he's building this unshakable platform of moral authority for what he's about to do next.
He's setting a trap in a way, isn't he? Because back in chapter 8, Samuel explicitly warned the people that a human king would be costly.
Yes, he told them a king would take their fields, draft their sons into his army, tax their harvests.
And now, by proving he never operated that way, he creates this razor-sharp contrast.
And that contrast is so vital. He establishes that his resistance to the monarchy wasn't about protecting his own wealth or status, because he literally never used his position for wealth or status.
Right. His clean record gives him the absolute credibility necessary to deliver this harsh historical critique without anyone being able to accuse him of hypocrisy.
Exactly. And because his slate is proven entirely clean, he now has the standing to hold up a mirror to the nation's incredibly messy track record.
So he launches into this history lesson, recounting God's righteous acts. He goes all the way back to Jacob settling in Egypt, and Moses and Aaron leading the Exodus.
He establishes a firm baseline of divine faithfulness, and then he juxtaposes it with this tragic, repetitive pattern of human behavior.
And the era of the judges was really defined by this cycle of spiritual amnesia. The study notes break this down into a recurring four-step cycle that dominated their society for centuries.
Right. Sin, suffering, supplication, and salvation. It operated like clockwork.
I was looking at how this cycle actually played out on the ground, and the psychology of it is just fascinating. The sin step always involved the people forgetting God and turning to foreign idols.
Specifically, the Baals and the Ashtaroth, which were the local Canaanite fertility gods.
Right, and it makes sense from a purely human agricultural perspective. I mean, the Israelites look at their neighbors who seem to be having great harvests, and they think, maybe we should hedge our bets and worship the weather gods, too.
Yeah, they trade their historical covenant for immediate perceived economic security.
Which invariably leads to the second step, which is suffering. By breaking the covenant, they essentially forfeit the divine protection they had relied on.
God just allows them to experience the natural consequences of their independence.
Yeah. They are repeatedly conquered by the very surrounding nations they were trying to emulate. Samuel specifically lists their oppressors, right?
He does. He mentions Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, the Philistines, and the king of Moab.
And so the suffering gets unbearable, which triggers step 3. Supplication. They finally cry out for help.
It's impossible to read this and not see a parallel to how we often operate today.
Oh, completely. It's like a toxic relationship dynamic. We demand total autonomy when the bank account is full and our health is great, completely ignoring the foundations of our well-being.
But the second a crisis hits, a medical emergency, a financial collapse, we suddenly want the divine safety net back.
Yes. We want the benefits of a sovereign protector without the obligations of an actual relationship.
And when the Israelites reached that breaking point and cried out, God repeatedly initiated the fourth step, which is salvation. He would raise up a judge, a temporary military and spiritual leader to break the oppression.
And Samuel lists Jerubbaal, Barak, Jephthah, and he even includes himself in that historical roster of deliverers.
Which is pretty bold, but completely accurate.
But the ultimate irony here is what triggered this specific gathering at Gilgal. The Ammonites, led by King Nahash, had recently threatened Israel.
Right, and instead of following the established pattern, instead of crying out to God and trusting the divine king who had consistently provided salvation through these judges,
They completely panicked. They looked around at the Ammonites and the Philistines, who all had these centralized, standing armies led by human kings, and they just demanded one for themselves.
they wanted to formalize their defense strategy. To them, this probably felt like a practical, modern upgrade to their governance.
It's so much like a startup company firing the visionary founder who built the business from scratch simply because the board wants a, safe, normal, corporate CEO who looks good on paper and wears a suit.
That's a great analogy. They trade a proven, dynamic relationship for an empty, bureaucratic structure just to impress their competitors.
But the real offense to God wasn't that they wanted organization, it was that they were actively rejecting his direct kingship.
Yes, they were stating, through their demand for Saul, that God's invisible protection was no longer sufficient for their modern problems.
And Samuel's challenge at Gilgal is to make this nation comprehend the absolute cosmic weight of that insult.
So Samuel has to explain the concept of a conditional monarchy. He tells them, look, God has granted your request. You have your human king standing right in front of you.
But the terms of your survival haven't changed. The human king does not replace the divine king. Saul is just like a middleman.
Right. If the people and their new king fear and serve God, they'll survive. But if they rebel, God's hand will be against them, just as it was against their ancestors.
But words alone are rarely enough to break through deep-seated complacency. Samuel realizes that a history lecture isn't going to register with a crowd that's basically throwing a coronation party.
No, he needs an undeniable demonstration of authority. So he calls on God to send thunder and rain right then and there.
And to understand why this matters so much, we really have to look at the agricultural calendar of ancient Israel. The Holman notes point out a crucial detail here. Samuel specifically performs this during the wheat harvest.
Which is huge. The wheat harvest in that region occurs in late May or early June. And Israel has a very distinct two-season climate.
Right.
The winter rains reliably stop by April and the dry season begins, and that lasts all the way until October. So rain during the wheat harvest is not just rare, it's practically unheard of.
So if you're standing in the dusty fields of Gilgal in June, the sky is completely clear. You aren't expecting a single drop of water for another 5 months.
Exactly. And beyond the meteorological impossibility, there's a massive economic threat.
Oh, yeah. Heavy rain and thunder during the wheat harvest could physically destroy the crops before they're gathered.
This wasn't just a mild weather anomaly.
Yeah.
This was a terrifying supernatural disruption of the natural order that threatened their immediate food supply.
It proved that the god they just basically marginalized has total sovereignty over the very nature they were trying to control through their new political system.
Yeah, nature doesn't answer to King Saul.
Right. But, I have to admit, I struggle a bit with the timing of this miracle.
How so?
Well, Saul has already been anointed. The political shift has happened. God allowed it. So why perform a terrifying miracle that threatens their food supply now? Isn't that just rubbing their noses in a decision they can't take back?
I can see why you'd say that. It feels almost punitive to scare them half to death after the contract is already signed.
Exactly.
But it only feels punitive if we view it as just a display of anger. It's actually a vital preventative object lesson.
Okay, unpack that a little.
Think back to that cycle of spiritual amnesia we just discussed. The people of Israel are absolute masters at taking God for granted.
True.
If Samuel just quietly hands over the keys to Saul and walks away into retirement, the people will immediately treat this new human monarchy as a free pass.
They'll assume their new standing army and their tall king mean they no longer have to rely on the covenant.
Precisely. So the thunderstorm shatters that illusion of human control. It proves that Saul's army can't stop the rain from destroying their crops.
Wow. So it forces them to realize that their new political structure is incredibly fragile compared to divine power.
The thunder is a wake-up call designed to prevent future disasters. They really need to feel the gravity of their actions in their bones so they never forget who is actually pulling the strings of reality.
And the text shows it works immediately. I mean, the people are terrified by this out-of-season storm. The reality of what they've done finally just crashes over them.
They beg Samuel, "Pray for your servants to the Lord your God so we don't die. We've added to all our sins this evil of asking for a king."
They stop viewing the monarchy as a smart political maneuver and finally recognize it as a spiritual betrayal.
Which is the critical pivot of the entire narrative. You have a terrified populace, a newly crowned king who's just been entirely upstaged by the weather, and an outgoing judge who has just been completely vindicated by God.
So if there was ever a moment for a massive, "I told you so," this is it. I mean, you'd expect Samuel to just walk away.
Yeah, you'd expect him to say, "You made your bed, now lie in it. You wanted a king, let him fix the weather."
But Samuel's response is the ultimate plot twist. He looks at this terrified crowd and tells them, "Do not fear."
He doesn't sugarcoat their actions, though. He validates their confession by agreeing that they committed a great evil.
But he immediately follows that conviction with a directive that is just breathtakingly simple. He says, "Don't turn away now. Serve God with all your heart."
And he warns them against chasing what he calls vain things.
Yeah, I was actually digging into the Hebrew terminology in this section, and the word used there is tohu. It's the exact same root word used in Genesis 1 to describe the earth before God brought order to it, formless and void.
Oh, that linguistic connection is profound. Samuel is explaining the literal mechanics of idolatry here.
Right.
These other nations' ways of doing things, these idols, these human power structures, they are so desperate to copy, they have absolutely no substance. They are tohu.
They have no power to save, to deliver, or to offer any actual security.
It is the ultimate tragic trade. They exchange a king who physically parted the Red Sea for a system that is literally formless and empty.
They traded reality for a void. It's wild.
Yet, despite that completely foolish trade, Samuel delivers a guarantee of unearned grace.
Yes, and the NWA study notes highlight such a beautiful theological anchor point in this speech.
They really do. Samuel assures the people that God will not abandon them. And the stated reason is crucial. God will not abandon them for his great name's sake, simply because it pleased God to make them his people.
That shifts the entire foundation of their security. Their survival is no longer based on their own track record, which, as the historical audit proved, is pretty terrible.
It's based entirely on God's character. God's reputation is intrinsically tied to this deeply flawed group of people.
Not because they earned it, but because he is unconditionally faithful to his own promises.
It is a one-way street of grace that stabilizes the nation during this really terrifying transition.
And this leads to my absolute favorite part of the chapter. It's a moment that completely redefines the concept of leadership for me.
Samuel makes a stunning commitment to the very people who just fired him.
He does. He says, Far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by ceasing to pray for you. And he promises to continue his two primary roles, which are interceding for them and teaching them the good and right way.
He completely separates his personal ego from his divine calling.
Yeah.
His calling was to care for the spiritual health of Israel. The fact that they rejected his political leadership didn't cancel his obligation to God.
Nor did it erase his love for them. I try to put myself in his shoes, and it is staggering. I mean, if a company ousted me or a community pushed me aside, my natural instinct would be self-preservation and bitterness.
Oh, definitely. You'd want to withdraw your support.
But Samuel considers it a literal sin against God to stop praying for the people who hurt him. He refuses to let their failure dictate his faithfulness.
Which brings us full circle to the public audit at the very beginning of our discussion.
Right.
The man who could stand before the entire nation and definitively prove he had never taken anything from them is the exact same man who now promises he will never withhold his prayers from them.
His integrity is just absolute. It's consistent from start to finish, regardless of how he is treated.
It really is a masterclass in unconditional leadership.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into 1 Samuel 12, I want to leave you with a different angle to mull over. One that reaches beyond the immediate history of Israel and kind of touches on how we handle our own transitions.
Because if Samuel's greatest act of leadership was handing over power with grace to a system he knew was deeply flawed, what does that mean for how we handle the baton passes in our own lives?
Exactly. In our own lives, what empty things or human kings are we demanding, convinced they'll fix our problems, when the ultimate solution has been there all along?
And when we have to step aside for the next generation, or when we watch someone we care about make a choice we fundamentally disagree with, the instinct is often to abandon them just to prove a point.
Right, we want to let them fail so they realize we were right all along. But Samuel shows us a completely different path.
He really does.
How drastically would our families, our workplaces, and our communities change if we viewed giving up on people, even when they are making a mistake, not as a justified reaction, but as a failure of our own personal integrity?
What if true leadership means staying in the boat and praying for the people who took the oars away from you?
That is a heavy but incredibly beautiful thought to carry into the rest of your week. Thank you for joining us as we explored this amazing ancient text and its profound modern implications. God blesses all the listeners.